Let's get started.
I didn't press the button. I know.
How many times have you heard this shir, Tani?
There's a
4?
Including online or not?
I think so. Oh yeah, it is. I think it is recorded.
Is this one of the ones you go back and listen to again?
How do you know if it's recording?
Okay, here we go.
It says record.
We're good.
Here we go. I'm gonna be using my notes a lot. There's a lot of moving parts in this year. Not one source. A lot of different things going on. Okay, so the question is, I'm going to start with a few questions to set us up and bring us in. A lot of good stories, a lot of good midrashic scenes in this year. It's going to be a fun one. If you like that kind of stuff. Okay, this is not heavy lifting like that Shemon Esrei year where we're working in a text. This is just sit back and enjoy. Yosef's bones. What's the deal with Yosef's bones? It's basically the question, but just to make the question more sharper. It says in Parsha Beshalach, for the sake of a gratuitous tie-in to the Parsha, there actually is one place in this shir where I quote a pasuk from this week's Parsha, so we can claim it's a Parsha shir on Shemot. It actually fits into this whole series of Parshas, starting last week, or even going back to Parsha Vayeshev, which we're also going to be quoting. In Parsha Beshalach, when Bnei Yisrael leave Mitzrayim, right at the beginning of the parsha, right, that's where it states that they leave, right? Vayhi b'shalach, actually states it a couple times, Parsha Bo also. It says, Vayhi b'shalach Paro et ha'am, v'lo nacham elokim derech eretz v'shtim ki karovu. When Paro sent out the nation, can you close that window? It's not a big difference, but it makes some difference to me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not leave them towards the land of Plishtim, ki karovu, because it's close. Skip Pasuk. We have to read these two psukim here. Vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo, and Moshe took Yosef's bones with him. Specifically mentions in the pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu took Yosef's bones with him. Ki hashbeah hishbiah ad bnei Yisrael lemor, because he hashbeah hishbiah, double verb. We know what that means in biblical text, right? It means surely. He surely, like emphatically, he caused Bnei Yisrael to swear, saying, Hakod yifkod elokim etchem. Hashem will surely remember you. Another double verb, Hakod yifkod. One of the words to remember is lifkod. You can consult your Malbim, Yair Or, to figure out the difference between lifkod and liskor. There's actually a fundamental difference. Lifkod means to remember something in the form of doing something. Let me say that again. Lifkod, like for instance, that verb appears in relation to Sarah, right? Hashem pakad et Sarah. Hashem remembered Sarah. What does that mean? And what did he do? He let her become pregnant. So it always implies remembering with an active purpose behind it. Okay. So pakod yifkod elokim etchem. Hashem will surely remember you, and that's why sometimes the English translation is translated as like, he will visit upon you, he will bring to you, something like that, because it implies an action. You can tell us afterwards, Akiva, what you find, but don't get distracted from the content of the shir. Is that what you were looking up? Okay, you found it? So what do you got there, Malvin? There you go. Thank you. Exactly what I just said. Right. I probably looked it up in the Malvin at some point. Okay, but I wasn't saying this from memory of the Malvin, but I probably did. I mean, so therefore it's lodged in my brain that that's what the word means. But it also makes sense from all the context. God will surely remember you. Let's get back to it. Okay, so here's our pasuk. And when Bnei Yisrael left Egypt, Moshe took Yosef's bones with him. Avi, open up the window all the way just so that we get the fresh air. Thank you. Good, perfect. Moshe took Yosef's bones with him because Yosef had made Bnei Yisrael take an oath, saying, God will surely remember you. What is that noise? God will surely remember you, and you will bring my bones up V'halitem. V'halitem, could you edit this out of the film? I might be able to. You might be able to. You could leave it on there for comic effect. But what? Where's he going?
Turning around.
Turning around.
My phone got way better.
No, you man. You should have your own show.
Yeah, first they want to vote.
Yeah.
Now they want to.
All right. Pakod yifkod elokim etzem v'alisem atat k'tav yizeitchem. God will surely remember you. God will surely remember you, and you will bring my bones up from this, meaning from Egypt, with you. So, okay, with a lot of interruptions. When they leave Egypt, there's a specific pasuk that tells us that Moshe took Yosef's bones. Now, why is this peculiar? Well, we'll save that question for a moment. Let's get to another question. In Sefer Yoshua, at the very end, that's the one text I didn't have up here. There must be a Tanakh line, right?
GPS.
Fine.
I wrote that also.
Fine, I'll use it. It's an imperfect world. Okay. Sefer Yoshua is 24 fucking long. It's a very boring book. Most of Sefer Yoshua is lists of names of places that were conquered and divided up by Bnei Israel. Ever read Sefer Yoshua? Raise your hand if you've read Sefer Yoshua. Okay. Now raise your hand if you were bored during most of it. There you go. Okay. The end of Sefer Yoshua is at the end of Sefer Yoshua takes how long? Start to finish? 14 years. It's 14 years of conquering and dividing up the land of Israel. This is basically what happens in the book. There's cool stories at the beginning. Thankfully, in school you go so slowly that you usually end up only doing the interesting part. But at the very end, I'm not going to read to you. So this is at the very end of Sefer Yoshua. It says that they finished. They divided up Eretz Yisrael. Yoshua dies, and then the second to last pasuk. This is the second to last pasuk in Sefer Yoshua. Ve'et atzmot Yosef. Asher he'elu b'nei Yisrael miMitzrayim kabru b'Shechem, and the bones of Yosef that Bnei Yisrael brought up from Egypt were buried in Shechem. B'chelkat hasadeh asher kana Yaakov, in the piece of property that Yaakov purchased me'et b'nei Chamor, from the children of Chamor, Avi Shechem, the father of Shechem, b'me'ak sita, for 100 kasitas. And it became the inheritance of the children of Yosef. Kever Yosef, which is up in Shechem today. So it mentions at the very end of Sefer Yoshua that Yosef was buried in Shechem. Now, what's peculiar about this is that a Rashi in Masechet Sota. Believe it or not, it's this Rashi that when I was learning Masechet Sota B'Kiyus, when I was in Kollel, it set me off on this whole journey, which became this shir. This is the first thing that caught my eye. Daf Zayin Amud Bet in Masechet Sota. There's some discussion in Masechet Sota. There's a lot of Agadata in Sota. If you like Gemaras with Agadata, Masechet Sota is for you. Masechet Sota, there's the whole thing about Yehuda doing tshuva. Okay, the whole thing about Yehuda doing tshuva and being forgiven. And it says V'zot liYudah. It's darshaning the psukim in the Zot HaBracha. And it says Kol otan shanim shayu Yisrael b'midbar. For all the 40 years that the Jewish people were in the desert, hayu atzmotav shel Yehuda megulgalim ba'aron. Yehuda's bones were rolling around. They were like disconnected from each other in the coffin. Ad she'amad Moshe u'bikesh elav rachamim. Until Moshe said V'zot liYudah. At the end of the 40 years, when Moshe davened on behalf of Yehuda, Amar lefanav, he said to him, Ribono shel olam. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to God, Ribono shel olam, mi garam l'Ruven shoda Yehuda, that Yehuda caused Ruvain to do tshuva for his avera. That's it. I'm not going to get into the context of the whole sugi here, but basically, Ruvain did an avera, Yehuda did an avera, Yehuda admitted his mistake. That so according to the Chazal, that caused Reuven to admit his mistake, and Moshe Rabbeinu uses that zechus that Yehuda caused Reuven to do tshuva to ask for as an atonement, to daven on behalf of Yehuda, and as a result, Yehuda's bones reconnected as a skeleton. That's the Gemara. What it means, let the Maharal and Rav Kook and those people sort it out. But what was interesting to me was Yehuda's coffin being carried through the desert. Interesting. Says Rashi, Atzmotav shel Yehuda migalgalim ba'arot. And here's the line that set me off. Atzmot kol hashvatim ha'elu mitzrayim. All of the bones of all of the shvatim, of all of the brothers, were carried out of Egypt. V'hu shamar Yosef, and that's what Yosef meant when he said, V'alitem et atzmotai mizeh itchem. You should bring my bones up with you. Literally, you guys who are here, my brothers, when they carry your bones out, they should carry my bones out. And then it says, and then Rashi goes on, in context of the Gemara, all the other skeletons were intact, Yehuda's wasn't, and the Agadah continues. So it occurred to me, wait a second. If Klal Yisrael carried the bones of all the brothers out of Mitzrayim, then there's actually nothing that unique about the fact that Yosef's bones were carried out of Mitzrayim. Right? Because all of them were carried out. The Torah doesn't tell us that Reuben's, and Shimon's, and Levi's, and Yehuda's were carried out of Mitzrayim. So what's the chiddush? Yosef's bones were carried out of Mitzrayim. Why did Moshe take them? I would assume that the bones of most of the Shvatim were taken by their offspring. Why was Moshe, it was from Shevet Levi, carrying out Yosef's bones? What does one have to do with the other? Why does it say Moshe took Yosef's bones? Why him? A lot of these aren't questions like glaring difficulties, but they're like, what is this all about? There's obviously something important. And the fact that they're mentioned at the end of Yoshua. Just to give the full scope of the sources, there's actually 3 places in the text where the phrase, in Tanakh, where the phrase Yosef's bones, Atzmot Yosef, appears. One of them, the last one, is the one at the end of Yoshua that we mentioned. Yosef's bones were buried in Shem at the end of the 14 years of the dividing up the land of Israel. The second one is in Parshat B'Shalach, that we mentioned that Moshe Rabbeinu took Yosef's bones. That was the pasuk we started with. The first place that Yosef's bones are mentioned are the end of Parshat Vayechi. And those pasukim we have to take a look at. The very end of Parshat Vayechi. These are the closing pasukim of Parshat Vayechi. I'm going to read to you the last 3 psukim of Sefer Bereshit. Okay? Yosef said to his brothers, Anochi meid. I'm dying right now. He's on his deathbed. His brothers are there. And he says, I'm going to die. Ve'elokim pakod yifkod etchem. And God will surely remember you. Ve'he'ela etchem min ha'aretz hazot. And He will bring you out of this land. El ha'aretz asher nishba l'Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov. To the land that He promised to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Vayashba Yosef. So that's something He just said to them. It says, Vayomer, Yosef said to his brothers, God's going to remember you, He's going to take you out of here. Next passage. Vayashba Yosef et bnei Israel. Yosef made the children of Israel swear, Lemor, saying, Pakod yifkod elokim etchem. God will surely remember you. Said it again. Va'alitem et atzmotai mizeh. And you will bring my bones out of this. Vayamot Yosef ben me'av eser shnim. And Yosef died at the age of 110. Vayachantu oto. They embalmed him. Vayisem b'arom ha'mitzrayim. And he was put into a coffin. And he was put into a coffin in Egypt. Now, Yosef's bones are mentioned at the beginning of the subjugation of the exile in Egypt, or at the end of Sefer Bereshit, the point of transition. into the suffering in Egypt. They're mentioned at the moment of Exodus from Egypt, and then they're mentioned at the end of the 14 years of the conquering of the land of Israel. So in addition to the questions that we had asked before, we have to ask another question. Why did they bury Yosef upon entry into the land of Israel? Why did they wait not only till the end of the 7 years of war to conquer the land, but why did they wait? Why did they wait till the end of 14 years, till they had finished dividing up Eretz Yisrael, to bury Yosef? You have bodies and coffins here. Why not bury him right away? So we have to understand that the beginning of the exile, the beginning of the development of the exile in Egypt, is the selling of Yosef. That's really where everything begins. That's where the dominoes start to fall from that point. When Yosef is sold, the pasuk states, "The Yosef hu rad Mitzrayim," and Yosef was brought down to Egypt. On that pasuk, "The Yosef hu rad Mitzrayim." It's in Parsha Vayeshev. Yosef is just sold. So in that pasuk, the Chizkuni writes, "Yosef hu rad Mitzrayim, shehu shiabud rishon shel Yisrael." That's the first galus of the Jewish people. Yosef going into Egypt. In addition, when there's a Targum Yonatan ben Uziel, Targum Yonatan is from Chazal, from the times of Era the Tanoim. When Yaakov sends Yosef to go check on his brothers, it says in the pasuk, "Vayishlachehu me'emek Chevron." That Yaakov sent him from the valley of Chevron. So the Targum Yonatan ben Uziel has an amazing translation of the pasuk. Instead of just translating, he sent him from the valley of Chevron. He says, "V'shadre al Esak Eita Amikta, v'itmalel im Avraham b'Chevron, uvahu yoma hava sharui galuta de Mitzrayim, v'kam va'atel Yosef v'Shechem." And he sent him based on the advice or the plan, the deep advice that had been stated to Avram in Chevron. And on that day, the galut of Mitzrayim began. When Yaakov sends Yosef to go see his brothers, he's sending him out, and on that day, Galut Mitzrayim begins. How are we to understand this? Well, if the selling of Yosef is the beginning of Galut Mitzrayim, then the fixing of Galut Mitzrayim, the Geula from Mitzrayim, must involve a fix for that sin, for that event. Whatever was done there, we need tshuva for that. So the tshuva for the selling of Yosef has to be a component, or maybe the component, of the Geula from Mitzrayim. Now Yosef didn't punish his brothers for selling him. On the contrary, we see in the Psukim, Yosef says to them in Breshit Mem Hey, right at the end, in Vayigash, it's before the end, when he reveals who he is to his brothers, and they're kind of shocked. He says, "Al te'atzvu v'al yichar beinechem ki mechartem otihena, ki l'mechiyah shelach ani elokim l'tnechem." He says, "Don't be upset, don't be worried, it shouldn't be bad in your eyes that you sold me, because God sent me here to take care of the family. It's actually a good thing." We also see this later on. This is near the end, in Bereshit Nun, right near the end of the Torah, in Vayechi. We have a similar statement from Yosef. The brothers come and they apologize to him, and and they say, we're your slaves, we're your servants, and they start apologizing for selling him. And Yosef says to them, Al tirau, don't be afraid. Ki atachad Elokim ani, what? Am I God? So Yosef doesn't punish his brothers. He doesn't seem to hold any grudge. Doesn't seem to have any problem with them. But that's how people shot. In the Midrashim, we see something different. In the Midrashim, Bereshit Rabbah, listen to this beautiful Medrash. V'etatzmot Yosef asher ha'elu b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim kabru b'Shem. The Bereshit Rabbah starts by quoting the pasuk in Yoshua. B'nei Yisrael, the bones of Yosef that B'nei Yisrael brought out of Mitzrayim were buried in Shem. Moshlimot olamad davar dameh. So it's a mashal. What is this similar to? L'listim shenichnasu l'martev shel yain. To thieves who entered into a wine cellar. They broke into somebody's wine cellar. Natlu kan echad. They took one jug of wine. V'shatu, they drank it. Hitzitz alayim bala martev. The owner of the wine cellar caught them. He walks in on them. Amar lam, and he says to them, Yerab lachem, enjoy it. Yivsam lachem, it should be fragrant. Hope it tastes good. Yivtak lachem, I hope it's sweet. Shetitem et hayayin, you drank the wine. Achziru et hakankan l'nkomo, now put the jug back. Kach amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'shvatim. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the Shvatim. Machartem et Yosef. You sold Yosef. Hachziru atzmotav l'mkoman. Okay, now go put him back. Go put him back in the place where you took him from. Davar acher. Alternate reading of the same idea. Amar lahem Yosef. Yosef said to his brothers, Limakom sheginavtuni sham tachziruni. The place you stole me from, put me back there. Halo achecha roim b'Shem. It says when Yaakov sends Yosef, your brothers are grazing the sheep in Shechem, shepherding the sheep in Shechem. Kei nasu b'nei Yisrael. That's what the Jewish people did. Shenemar, as it says at the end of Yoshua, v'etatzmot Yosef asher ha'elu b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim tavru b'Shechem. So that pasuk at the end of Yoshua is closing the circle on the story that begins in Parshat Vayeshev. The end of the story. Meaning, when is the tikkun and the completion of the story? Yaakov sends Yosef out to Shechem. Sefer Shmo, Sefer Bamidbar, Sefer Dvarim, all of Sefer Yoshua. Everyone's finally back in Israel, back where we're supposed to be. Yosef's in the ground in Shechem. That's the end of the story. That's the way this message paints the picture. So here, it's not that they're totally forgiven and it's no big deal. Here, we see a different approach. That they have to make a tikkun. They have to somehow, there has to be a midah keneged midah, a measure for measure. Now at the end of Yosef's life, as we mentioned before, what's going on? No, we'll deal with it later. At the end of Yosef's life, Yosef causes Bnei Yisrael to take an oath. He makes them take an oath. I want to go back to that oath now. God will surely remember you, and you will bring my bones out of here. Now there's a question here. Why does he say the words pakod yifkod in the oath? What do I mean? The previous pasuk, he already said, pakod yifkod elokim etchem ve'ela'atchem. Right? God will surely remember you and will take you out of Egypt. So the very next pasuk should be, and he made them swear, you shall take my bones out with you. Why does it say pakod yifkod again? So the simple pshat is that Yosef is saying to his brothers, this is a simple pshat. But this shir isn't really about simple pshat. The simple pshat is, Yosef says to his brothers, pakod yifkod elokim etchem, when God will surely remember you, and it's like a clause, when God will surely remember you, you should bring me out. It's just it's the context for the oath. You will be obligated to take me out when God will remember you. So we have to ask, why is this, going back to the Gemara in Sota, all the brothers' bones were taken out. We don't have any evidence in the Torah of the brothers making their children swear or making each other swear, or all the bones were taken out. Anyway, why is this? This seems to be a private matter. There were probably all kinds of private matters that went on between these people that are not recorded in the Torah. Why is what seems to be a private request included in the text of the Torah in such an emphatic way, ending Sefer Bereshit? So, Al Pi Drush, I said Al Pi Pshat, the Pakod Yifkod is just saying when he remembers you, he'll take them out. But Al Pi Drush, I'd like to offer a different approach to that oath, and which will help us understand why a seemingly private, personal request is not actually what it seems. So what's this Pakod Pakadati? I'm sorry, this Pakod Yifkod. When God sent Moshe, and here we get to the gratuitous tie into this week's parasha, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent Moshe to save the Jewish people, he gave him, besides the simanim of the staff and the leprosy and the blood, he also gave him a verbal cue. Words that he should say. And the words are in Perek Gimel, Pasuk Tet Zayin, right, in this week's parasha. The pasuk states as follows: Lech va'asafta et ziknei Yisrael. Hashem says to Moshe, go and gather together the elders of Israel. This is at the burning bush. Va'amarta alehem, and you should say to them, Hashem Elokei avotechem nira elai. Moshe, I want you to go to Egypt, gather together the elders of the Jewish people, and tell them that Hashem, the God of your forefathers, appeared to me on the Messiah. Go tell them. God spoke to me. Okay? The God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, the God of Yaakov. Lemor, saying, Pakod pakadati etchem. I have surely remembered you. V'tasu lechem mitzrayim, and that which happened to you in Egypt. Now, you have to not be paying attention. If you're reading this novel, if you're reading this book, and you've just seen these two psukim by Yosef, Pakod Yifkod, and then 3 prakim later, God says to Moshe, go tell the elders of Israel, Pakod pakadati etchem, I have surely remembered you, and what happened to you in Egypt. And tell them that I'm going to take you out, and it goes on and on, the whole thing, to the land of milk and honey, etc. The whole speech. There's a Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer is a fascinating medrash, and in Perek Mem Chet of the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, it ties together this line, Pakod Pakadati. It says as follows: Ukeshba Moshe v'Aaron etzel ziknei Yisrael. When Moshe and Aaron came to the elders of Israel, asu ahotot le'enehem. They did all the signs and miracles in front of them. You know, they threw the staff on the ground, it became a snake. They did the leprosy hand trick, you know. So, what did the elders do? There was a lot of magic in Egypt. Halchu ziknei Yisrael etzel ziknatan Serach bat Asher. So the elders of Israel went to their elder, who was the oldest Jew around, Serach, the daughter of Asher, who was still alive. Serach bat Asher, she was old. She was like a couple hundred years old. She was probably, if you approximated, probably about 250 years old. 220, 230, something like that. Okay? She was an old lady. Serach, the daughter of Asher. So they went to Serach bat Asher. That's who they would consult with questions, because there were probably all kinds of false messiahs running around saying they're going to save them, like any slave population had. So they go to Serach bat Asher. Va'amrula, and they said to her, Ba ish v'asau tot leinenu kach v'kach. So they said to her, you know, we got this guy who came, says God spoke to him, he says he's going to save us, and she's like, yeah, whatever. So, well, he did all these miracles. He staff turned into a snake, and he did the hand leprosy, and he threw water on the ground from the Nile, it turned into blood. Amralem, she said to them, Ein bo tota elu mamash. She said, signs don't mean anything. It could be party tricks, it could be black magic. Doesn't mean anything. Amrullah, they said to her, her, "V'halo amar lanu pakod pakarati etchem." So they said, yeah, but he also said something. Funny words he used. He said that God said pakod pakarati etchem. Amra lahem, she said to them, Hu haish shatid ligol et Yisrael Mitzrayim. He's the guy. That's it. He's the one. Now, where did Serach bat Asher get this from? Who's Serach bat Asher? Serach bat Asher, she's the daughter of Asher. She's mentioned in a couple inconsequential psukim in Chumash. Serach bat Asher is mentioned as one of the 70 souls that come down to Egypt, even though we have to assume that there were many other females born, but for some reason she's singled out. Not only that, she's mentioned there, she's mentioned one other place. At the end of Sefer Bamidbar, when it's listing all the heads of families that are going to inherit the land of Israel. It's a strange thing. This is in Parshat Pinchas, all the way at the end of the Torah, listing all the heads of the families. You know, it says Bnei Binyamin, and it says who they are. Right? It goes through all the different Eila Mishpachot HaRuveni, Alu, Eliyav, Nemuel. It goes through Bnei Shimon, Mishpachot HaNemueli, Liyamin, Mishpachot HaYamini. It goes through all of the different Eila Mishpachot, all the different families, and then it gets to Bnei Asher LeMishpachotam, and of course what it always does with these lists is it names the male heads of families, the clans that were part of each Shevet. Each Shevet had thousands and thousands of people, and they were divided up into clans that had names based on the sons of the original sons of the person. Right? Everyone get that? So like one of the sons of Reuven was Chetzron, so there was a whole clan of thousands of people in Shevet Reuven that was called HaChetzroni, the Chetzroni family. Right? This is what it says. Bnei Asher leMishpachotam, liyimna Mishpachat HaYimni, Mishpachat HaYimna, liyishvi Mishpachat HaYishvi, liBriya Mishpachat HaBri. Bnei Briya, it says the kids of Briya, all these different families in the Shevet. V'shem bat Asher, Serach. And then it just says in the middle, and Asher's daughter was named Sarah. It doesn't say there's a Sarchi family. It doesn't name a family after her, which would have been weird also, have a family named after a woman. All it just says in the middle of a list of families, of clans, it says, oh, and Shem's daughter was named Sarah. And then it goes on, it continues with the list of families. What's going on? So Chazal took these two psukim, the fact that she's mentioned in these two places, and they developed an entire character around these psukim. We talked about this before when we talked about Og and others, that sometimes Chazal will develop a character and create a whole world. So Chazal said, you know why Sarah is mentioned here? She was still alive. When they entered Israel at the end of the 40 years in the desert, she's still alive. So therefore, she had to be listed among the people who was inheriting the land of Israel, but she wasn't the head of a family. She was still alive. Rashi says it right here in the pasuk, V'shem et Asher Sarah, L'fi she'ayta kayemet b'chayim v'na'akan. Since she was still alive, it mentions her. So Sarah, she was there. How did she know the pakod pakadati with the magic words? Not because she was a prophet. We know how she knew. She was there. When Yosef made everyone swear and said, Pakod yifkod elokim etchem, and he said it twice. The stress on the words, Pakod yifkod, that's why he says it twice. He's telling them, these are the magic words. She was present that day. And now 210 years later, it's like coming like a voice out of the past. She hears this false Messiah, that false Messiah, this miracle, that miracle. He said, Pakod pakadati. What? That's it. That's it. Now, Serach, it doesn't stop there with Serach. Moshe. So I want to suggest. I want to suggest, based on the medrash we're about to read as well, that that the way we originally understood the oath was wrong. We originally said, what was the oath? What's the pshat of the oath? When God remembers you, take my bones out. I want to suggest the following. Yosef was saying to them, God will take you out on condition that you take my bones with you. Listen to this medrash. B'sha'ashi arad l'Mitzrayim v'higia glotani shel Yisrael. When Moshe came to Mitzrayim, the time came for the gula of the Jewish people. Kol Yisrael ayu asukim b'kesef hazahav. So at the time came to leave Egypt, what are all the Jews busy with? They were gathering up all the gold and silver. We know the immense amounts of gold and silver that the Jewish people took with them when they left Egypt. And Moshe was running around the city. Cairo, whatever city it was. He's running around the city for 3 days and 3 nights. Limso arono shel Yosef, looking for Yosef's coffin. Why? Listen carefully. Because they would not be able to leave without Yosef. Lama? Why not? Because that was the oath before he died. And Yosef made Bnei Israel swear. Meaning, that's the correct understanding of the oath. You can't leave unless you take my bones with you. Moshe was exhausted because he's running around. He can't find Yosef's bones. It's getting urgent. Time is going. The Bnei Israel's gathering up the bones, the blood on the doorpost, the whole thing that's going on, and everyone's running around. And he's like, "Oh, I cannot find Yosef's bones." Hagabo, Sarah. She had 2 names. In the Midrash, it sometimes calls her Segula, and then there's always a note that says the same person is Sarah, which is interesting in itself. Separate topic. He meets up with. There's 3 different places where this Midrash appears, and 2 of them it says Sarah, and 1 of them it says Segula. He meets up with Sarah. She sees Moshe exhausted. Amralo, she says to him, Adonai Moshe, she says, my master, Moshe, Lama Tayef, what are you so tired about? I see you're running around, you're out of breath. Amarlo, he said to her, he said, I'm running around for 3 days and 3 nights looking for Yosef's coffin, I can't find it. Amralo, she said to him, come with me, I'll show you where it is. Come. So she comes, they go together. They walk over to the river. Amralo, she says to him, in this place, they made a coffin out of 500 bricks. And they threw it into the river. All of the soothsayers and sorcerers of Egypt threw that coffin into the river. And this is what they said to Paro. You want the Jewish people to never be able to leave Egypt? Yosef's bones. If they don't find them, they can never leave. Listen to that. They knew it too. Carrying Yosef's bones out is not just a nice chesed to Yosef to carry his bones out. Think back to what we're thinking at the beginning of the shir. The whole geula is built around. You can't. There's no geula from Mitzrayim without taking those bones with. That's the key to the whole thing. The Egyptians knew it. Bnei Israel knew it. Moshe knew it. So, story continues. Immediately, Amad Moshe al Svati Anachal. So Moshe stood by the bank of the river of Amar, and he said, Yosef, Yosef, you know that you made Bnei Israel swear. Pakod yifkod Elokim etchem. Tein kavod le'elokei Israel. Give honor to the God of Israel. He's davening. Ve'al ta'kev gulatan she'Yisrael. Don't delay the geula of Bnei Israel. Ma'asim tovim yeshlach. Yosef, you've done a lot of good. Bakesh rachamim mipnei borachav alim minatomot. Yosef davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you should rise up from the depths. Miyad hitchila rono shel Yosef mefapeh v'oleh. So Yosef's coffin immediately started bubbling up to the surface. Mina te'omot, from the depths, kekanechad, like a reed, just floating up to the top. Lakachoto, Moshe took it, samoto aktefo, he stuck it on his shoulder, and he was bearing it, the burden of it, and all the Jewish people after him. The Jewish people were carrying all the gold and silver, and Moshe's carrying Yosef's coffin. Amazing.
He lifted the whole coffin?
This is the Medrash Rabbah. It's in Dvarim Rabbah. So who's the Serach? Think about the role that Chazal created. Serach Bat Asher. She's the old woman. She's the one who gives the hechsher, the stamp of approval. Moshe is really the Goel. She's the one who remembers the old world. She's the gatekeeper. Klal Yisrael wants to leave Egypt. Moshe can't do what he has to do. Serach opens the door. Serach reveals she has the piece of information that he needs. She has the piece of information the Zakanim need, the Kod Pakarati. She knows where Yosef's buried. She's the connection. Serach Bat Asher, Chazal tell us she was born in Eretz Yisrael. She knew granddad Yaakov. According to Chazal, she's the one who tells Yaakov that Yosef is still alive. That they were afraid Yaakov would have a heart attack. So she played at harp and she sang. So it was a more pleasant way for Yaakov to hear it, calm him down. She's there when Yosef dies. She's the gatekeeper of the Geula. She spends 40 years in the Midbar. Old lady. And sometime close to her 270th, 80th birthday, she enters back into Eretz Yisrael. Why is Serach mentioned at the end of Bamidbar, the people going into the land of Israel? Because unlike everyone else, she was going home. She was going home. She went into exile in Egypt, and now she's going back. What does Serach represent? What were Chazal doing? Just imagine you're living at that time. And you're in Mitzrayim, and you're a Jew, and it's the Yiddish expression, Shvel zu sein a Yid, it's tough to be a Jew. The Gullus was heavy. And they had all these promises that they were told, passed down generation to generation, that there was someone named Avram, and there was someone named Yitzchak, and there were these Shvatim, and we have this great promise, us decrepit slaves, yes, really we're a great nation, God's going to give us the promised land, and we're the chosen people, and blah, 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 blah. And it all seems like a fairy tale, it all seems so far away, so impossible. And every now and then, when you go to the marketplace, to pick up some potatoes and chickens, there's this old lady that everyone knows about, this famous woman. You're walking, and you see her walking. Serach Bat Asher, old wrinkled old lady. She remembers. She was born in Canaan. She remembers Yaakov Avinu. She remembers Yaakov Avinu. About 2 months ago, Rabbi Yaakov Naiman passed away. Anyone ever hear of Rabbi Yaakov Naiman? He lived in Long Island. Rabbi Yaakov Naiman died at the age of 100. He was lucid, going to shul, giving shiur until the age of 100. Rabbi Yaakov Naiman, big Talmud Chacham, was the last living person who remembered seeing Reb Chaim Brisker. Sorry, Reb Chaim Brisker. He remembered it. He was a kid. Chaim Brisker died in 1918. Chaim Brisker died. He was about 8, 9, and he lived in Brisk, and he remembered as a child seeing Reb Chaim Brisker a few times. He didn't learn from Reb Chaim Brisker. He learned from some other people who are long gone. I had the privilege a couple months ago to meet a 97-year-old Rav, great Rav named Rav Aaron Ben Zion Shurin. I remember seeing Rav Chaim Ozer Grudzinski. He had a relationship. I had a close relationship with the Chazon Ish. 97 years old today. I remember one time in my life, I saw a person in Yeshivat Merkaz Rav Kook in Yerushalayim, an old man, not with a beard or anything, but was an old man. Everyone was saying Shabbos and giving him kavod. When I asked one of the people I knew in Merkaz Rav, what's so special about this old man, they said he's very old. When he was a child, when he was a young man, he lived in the Chafetz Chaim's house for a while. He knew the Chafetz Chaim. Serach is the connection. I want you to imagine the following. Imagine that God, for whatever reason, decided to keep alive one person, not a big tzaddik, not a special, just kept one person alive from the time of the Churban to today. That there was some, like, one of these little hole-in-the-wall apartments in Yerushalayim, and like Meir Sharim or Nachlaot or Shari Chesed. One of these little with a metal door. One of these, these old men with the baskets in Machane Yehuda. Let's say you had this one old guy in Yerushalayim who was like 2,000 years old. And he just lived, he eats his hard-boiled egg and his cucumber every day, Scottish sheep. And he remembers eating a carbon Pesach and being at the Beit HaMikdash. He remembers, I remember, a child, a long time ago. Imagine if there was such a person alive today, and you could meet him, take a Shabbos to see him. See that guy? He ate a carbon Pesach. He was eating the Beit HaMikdash. Imagine what it would do to you in terms of making the Beit HaMikdash seem less like a fairy tale. To meet someone who was there. How much more real would the whole thing become? That's what Serach is. And at the same time, she's the key to the Geula. There's no Geula without Serach. She opens the door to the Geula. You know what Chazal are telling us? Chazal are telling us that the key to the Geula, one of the keys to the Geula, is connecting to the past and making it real. Making it real. And one of the main ways we connect to the past and make it real is to connect to people who were there and really bring it to life. Could you imagine what it's like? Imagine just a child in Mitzrayim who's legends of Yaakov Avinu. She knew him. She bounced on his knee. Sarah Patasha. That's who Sarah Patasha is. So that person, that idea, that's the key to the Geula. That's the Serach. Let's get back to Yosef's bones. So we see from the Midrashim that we saw that bringing Yosef's bones out of Mitzrayim wasn't just, it was not a personal favor. Now we know why it's in the Torah. It was the condition for getting out of Mitzrayim. You cannot leave without bringing Yosef's bones. We see from the Medrash that without Yosef's bones they can't leave. So why? Why not? Because the Geula has to fix the cause of the Golus. That's what we started with. The Geula has to fix the cause of the Golus. The Golus started with the selling of Yosef. The Geula has to be a tikkun of that chait. Now, what is the chait of the selling of Yosef, really? If we get down to the core of the chait, the motivation for the chait, we don't really have to explain it. Any of us know it. The chait was sinas chinam, hatred. The cause of every Golus. Golus starts with hatred between brothers, a lack of unity. When Yosef goes to see his brothers and he can't find them, and he meets this person, this cryptic encounter he has with this man, and he says, "I'm looking for my brothers." At the Chaya Anochim Vakesh, and he says, "Nas'um mizeh," they have left this.
Chazal take that cryptic language and say, what does it mean? He said, I'm looking for my brothers. And he said, there's no brotherhood anymore. They're gone. That's over with. There was no brotherhood. Nasumin ha'achva, Rashi says. So what does the tikkun of the chait have to be? It has to be a tikkun of achva, of brotherhood. Now, besides the fact that they took him from Shem, so they have to put him back in Shem, like we had the story with the bottle of wine. Put me back where you took me from. Why? Other than that, other than the fact that they put him back where they took him from, how does, other than the place, I'm asking, how does bringing Yosef's bones fix the chait of selling him? So Rabbeinu Bachai al Torah, he has a wonderful idea. Rabbeinu Bachai al Torah, we spoke about him in Torah Research Skills a couple weeks ago, right? Listen to this beautiful comment from Rabbeinu Bachai. V'hinei zachai Yosef sheyaleh Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom et atzmotav buchlusa. Yosef was zocheh that Moshe Rabbeinu carried up his bones with a great multitude of people. He quotes the pasuk in Yoshua that Bnei Israel took Yosef's bones. It's known. The halacha is, the halacha by a funeral is that you're allowed to be mevatel Torah to go to a funeral unless there's enough people at the funeral already. So what's enough? It depends on the person. So all these sugyas. So for a Talmid Chacham, for a tzaddik, up to 600,000 people. Why? So the Chazal say, Kinitinata kachnatilata. Because the Torah was given to 600,000 people, so when the Torah is taken away, when a tzaddik is taken away, that's the appropriate number for the funeral. So if they haven't reached that number yet, which they almost never do, it's a lot of people at a funeral, you still go to the funeral. K'mi mevatel Torah to go to the funeral. Manatinata b'shishim ribo, afnatilata b'shishim ribo. He quotes that. So what's Rabbeinu Bachai saying? You know what he's saying? The 40 years in the Midbar? It's a funeral procession. That was one heck of a funeral procession. Leaving Mitzrayim, all of Klal Yisrael. The whole exercise of the Geula is an exercise in returning Yosef's bones. Not to the place. It's not about the place. It's about unity. And it's about chesed. What is going on? What is that noise? What's the music? Like the okay. Okay, fine. Forget it. All right. If the chait was a sin of hatred, a funeral is chesed shalemet. It's ultimate chesed. You've heard that expression. It's giving Yosef kavod en masse, everyone together. There's a wonderful comment by the Alshich. Alshich is a great commentary on Tanakh. The Alshich makes a comment at the very end of Sefer Yoshua on that pasuk that they buried him in Shechem. He says something really cool. He says they had to bury him there. You know why? He said there's two ways that people could own land in Eretz Yisrael. You can own land in Eretz Yisrael because it's part of your shevet, and we conquered the land and then it was divided up. Or there's another way. Well, let me explain that a little bit. When we conquered the land of Israel, before we divided it up, who owned each piece of land? Nobody yet. And then we divided it up and gave, this piece belongs to Shevet Dan, this piece belongs to Shevet Naphtali. And why did we own that land? Because we conquered it in war. Conquered the land, we divided it up. However, there were two places in Eretz Yisrael that were not ours because we conquered them. That's Maras HaMachpelah and that piece of property in Shechem. Remember, at the end of Sefer Yoshua, when I read the pasuk, it mentioned that Yaakov bought it. Remember that? And how much he paid for it. Okay, fine. Why? Just say you buried him in Shechem. Why do you have to remind me that Yaakov bought it? I know Chumash. Why are you reminding me that Yaakov bought it? So the Alshich says the reason it's reminding us that Yaakov bought it is to remind us something like this. Every single Jew is an heir, is a descendant of Yaakov Avinu, which means that anything Yaakov owned, what's the rule of inheritance? Someone passes away, he has a bunch of kids. Until they divide up the inheritance, who owns his property? All of them jointly. But land that was conquered in war to be divided up doesn't belong to anyone. That's different than inheritance. That wasn't inherited. So there are only two inherited pieces of property in Eretz Yisrael: Mars Machpelah and that piece of property in Shechem. So he says they had to bury him in Shechem because they buried him in one of the only pieces of property that was actually jointly owned by all of Klal Yisrael. Yosef gets buried in a piece of property that every Jew jointly owns. It's an inheritance from our granddad that we never divided up, so it remains jointly owned by all of us. The ultimate yichud, Yosef, who was sold through the ultimate lack of unity, is then buried by all of Klal Yisrael together in a unified manner in Shechem. We'll close with a medrash that appears immediately before the medrash about the flask of wine. Right before it,
He gets it. Yes, he gets it. All right? Like that. That you have the mammal, but I thought mammals only had. I kept it out.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, right? It's not straight. Because one of the definitions of mammal,
wait, here we go.
they have a rule. It's all inside. You have to give birth to full-grown animals.
Here we go.
Okay.
So that medrash that I read you was actually the second half of a piece of medrash, like of piece Gimel in Bereishit Rabbah Chafei. The previous piece says as follows. It says, Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon, Rabbi Chanin bar Shem Yochanan, Kol mishu matchil b'mitzvah ve'no gomra, anyone who starts a mitzvah and doesn't finish it, koveret ishto vet banav, buries his wife and kids. Mimi atalamedu, who you learn this from? Yehuda. You learn this from Yehuda. Vayomer Yehuda, what's the mitzvah he started? He knew there was something wrong with killing Yosef, so he said, let's not kill him. So since he knew there was something wrong with his whole thing, he should have just saved him completely. He shouldn't have decided to sell it. So he started a mitzvah but didn't really finish it. He should have just picked Yosef up and brought him back home. Magaramlo, what did it cause him? It caused him that he ended up losing his wife and kids. Rav Huna b'Shem Rabbi Eliezer, Benosh Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Kol mi shematchil b'mitzvah ve'ino gomra, v'acher ba the Gomra, he nikret al shmo shel sheni. Rav Huna b'Shem Rabbi Eliezer says that if a person starts a mitzvah and someone else finishes it, I start a mitzvah, you finish it, you get the credit. It's called after you. It's called Oliver's mitzvah. Right? I started, Oliver finishes it, it's called Oliver's mitzvah. Why? Where do we learn that from? From the bones of Yosef. It says Moshe took Yosef's bones out of Egypt. But did Moshe finish the job? No. Who finished it? Bnei Yisrael. So what does it say in Yoshua? Betatzmot Yosef asher he'elu Bnei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim kol b'Shem. And Yosef's bones that Bnei Yisrael took out of Mitzrayim. Who took it out of Mitzrayim? Moshe. But it says that Bnei Yisrael took out of Mitzrayim is buried in Shem. Why? Because they finished the mitzvah. Okay. There's a problem with this medrash. I'm going to restate it very simply, and I'll point out the problem. The first piece of the medrash says that if you start a mitzvah and you don't finish it, it's a horrible thing, you bury your wife and kids. We learn this from Yehuda. Second thing says if you start a mitzvah and someone else finishes it, it's called after the second person. And it uses Moshe as the example of the person who started, and Bnei Yisrael as the example of people who finish. I have a question. If you start a mitzvah and someone else finishes it, aren't you someone who started a mitzvah and didn't finish it? Right? So what makes Moshe different than Yehuda? They both started a mitzvah, right? Understand my question? The first part of the medrash says, if you start a mitzvah and don't finish it, terrible thing, you bury your wife and kids. Yehuda. Second part of the medrash says, if you start a mitzvah and someone else finishes it, it's called after his name, like Moshe and Bnei Yisrael. Lovely. Teamwork, passing the baton. But if you start a mitzvah and someone else finishes it, that means you're a guy who fits into category 1. You started a mitzvah and didn't finish it.
Maybe it's like you're unable to.
Tell you what the answer is. They're starting a mitzvah and not finishing it. They're starting a mitzvah and not finishing it. And they're starting a mitzvah and creating a situation where someone else will finish it. Passing it on to the next generation. There's two types of not finishing a mitzvah. There's not finishing a mitzvah because it's unfinished, because you didn't really do the deal. You didn't close the deal. And there's not finishing a mitzvah because you passed it on to the next generation for them to finish. You passed it on for someone else to complete. One of them is terrible. The reason it says he buries his wife and kids, it's another way of saying, in order to raise a wife and children, you have to You have to be passing something on to the future. To say you bury your wife and kids, what it basically means is if you're a person who starts and doesn't finish them, if you're not passing things on, as opposed to Moshe, who is passing things on. The burial of Yosef, this whole story, Serach Bat Asher, what it's all about is joint responsibility across generations. Klal Yisrael functioning as a unit, not only the ones who are alive at a given time, but connected all the way across hundreds of years. Starting a mitzvah, finishing a mitzvah. Yosef has a funeral procession that lasts 54 years. 40 years in the desert, then another 14 years in the land of Israel. 54-year funeral procession. All of Am Yisrael participating in it. This is the way we get into the Gullus is through hatred and through a lack of unity. The way we get out of the Gullus is through unity, but unity together with feeling intimately connected to the past. Through the serachs among us. Through making the past come alive and feeling that it's our responsibility to finish what the previous generations started. Good night.